So, this is our whatever we're calling this podcast, discussion, whatever. This is all about fractional general counsel. Now, first of all, I wanted to give some context, okay? I did some research this morning, and the legal profession's been around since like the 1100s or whatever. And a lot, in fact, when the legal profession started, the idea was a lawyer cannot charge for his services. That was the original basis of what we did. For like 100 to 300 years, we couldn't charge for our services. And then it became we could charge for our services. And then it became people started paying us per word. And then it became people started paying us per hour. And then it stopped. So right around, I think, the 1800s, we started getting paid by the hour. And that continues to today. And so the point of this conversation is because so much has changed in the past 5 years, never mind 10, never mind 100. And meanwhile, law firms are still billing by the hour. And the customer has increasingly said, look, this is just wonky. This is not the way it works. But we didn't have a way of conceptualizing what would work for us and for the client, because the idea was common outcome, what works for both of us, what's going to be mutual benefit between client and attorney. And then technology solved, like it solved for so many things, it solved for this. It gave us the idea of a subscription agreement. This idea that you pay a regular amount of money every single month for a suite of services, which hopefully with time gets more and more the Netflix model. You know, when you started, there were only this many movies, and now and they keep pumping, and then all of a sudden you have this sea of service that you get from a monthly subscription that is a flat fee that you understand it can work into your budget. So we saw this at Romano Law, and we thought, okay, this is the future of law practice, and so we built Fractional General Counsel. The purpose of this call, Steve, is because you're the man when it comes to fractional general counsel. Now, we're going to call it different things. We're going to call it membership legal services. We're going to call it, I don't know, whatever, fractional general counsel or subscription legal services. The idea is, what is this thing and why should a client be excited about becoming a part of it? So what I want to hear from you, Steve, right now is, what is the layman terms, the non-legal terms for what we're calling fractional general counsel? How would you describe it?
I call it outside general counsel. So you're not in-house counsel, you're not working for the company, you're an independent contractor or you're a law firm that's providing legal services that a traditional in-house general counsel would provide.
Okay, so now you call this something else. I didn't even call it outside general counsel. So the most important thing is there's going to be a lot of names used. It really doesn't matter. It's the same concept. Okay. Now, could you compare this to what people or clients are used to when they go to a lawyer? What would be how would you contrast it? The clearest
There,
contrast you can give.
it's definitely not like the traditional person going to a lawyer. A traditional person going to a lawyer is going to get one of two options, and it's going to depend upon the nature of the legal matter. It could be a transactional fee, such as you usually get charged a flat rate, let's say for doing a will or a trust or a real estate closing. Those are things that are usually amenable to, it's going to cost X amount of dollars because the lawyer knows how much time it's going to take. The other is you go to a lawyer and they're going to charge you by the hour. They're going to say, I don't know how long this is going to take, but if I work on it for 3.5 hours, I expect to be paid for 3.5 hours. On the other hand, the client says, okay, if you work 3.5 hours, I'll pay you 3.5 hours. But my experience is most clients do not like the billable hour model, and a lot of lawyers don't like it either for a lot of good reasons.
Okay, so we all agree that we don't like this stuff. Okay, so why isn't it like duh? Like, why is this not the way law is practiced everywhere?
Well, you said it to begin with. The legal profession has been around for a very long time. And we know that the legal profession has failed to modernize. It's failed to move along with the times and change with whether it be modern day technology, modern day ways of doing business. And it's stuck on not just the traditional methodology on how you practice law, but the legal profession is still stuck on the billable hour. People can't conceptualize how can you provide legal services and be compensated by any method other than a flat fee or a billable hour?
You know, our founding partner, Dominic, comes up with all this crazy stuff in meetings, and it's always fun for me to pick up on the juicy ones. And he says something, what's in it for me, right? And we started saying that in the firm, what's in it for me, right? So outside general counsel, whatever we're calling it, what's in it for the client? What's in it for the, let's be very honest and not just say what's in it for the client, which every salesman knows that, oh, this is great, it's going to work. What's in it for the client and what's in it for the lawyer?
Well, on the one hand, what we're really talking about for fractional general counsel services, it's for businesses. It could be small businesses, it could be startups, it could be larger businesses. So it being directed at a business, you start with the proposition of, in my opinion, every business needs a lawyer. Now, do you need a full-time lawyer? Not necessarily, but every business needs a lawyer for, at the very least, for purposes of compliance with the law. There's numerous laws. If you have one employee, there's laws that you have to comply with. If you're in a specific industry, there's regulations that you have to comply with. And most business owners and operators simply go forward thinking, yeah, I believe what I'm doing is correct. I believe what I'm doing is within the bounds of the law, but they don't really know for sure because they never ran it by a lawyer. So every company needs legal services. It's just a matter of, do they want to pay for it? And up until now, it's, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to hire a lawyer on an hourly basis to pay for something that I may not need. Maybe I am in compliance. So that goes back to the other mentality, which is, and I've said this a million times and I'll continue to say it a million times, a lawyer could be one of two things, either a doctor or a firefighter. If you're a doctor, then you're going to go to the doctor for regular checkups. You're going to go to the doctor to get examined. You're going to go to the doctor to get either a clean bill of health or to get you to the point of a clean bill of health. You know, if you have hypertension, then you go to a doctor. You get put on medication to get a clean bill of health. If you have high blood pressure, same thing. You're going to do certain things, change of diet. The doctor's going to lead you along the way. That's to prevent a problem. That's to prevent hypertension from turning into diabetes. It's if you get squamous cell carcinoma, which is non-cancerous, you want to make sure that you get that excised before it turns into a potentially cancerous situation. So that's what a company will do that I believe is smart. They're going to get ahead of problems before they become problems. On the other hand, a lawyer could be a firefighter, which is the company that doesn't get legal advice, proceeds for years on end, and says, I think what I'm doing is correct. I don't believe it's wrong, but I don't know for sure. What happens is they're going to eventually get hit with a lawsuit, not know why. They're going to have to contact the lawyer. The lawyer's going to bill them top dollar because it's generally a litigation matter where the stakes are higher. And the lawyer's going to say, I'm going to do my best to contain the damage. I don't know how much this is going to cost you because I don't know how long it's going to last, but be prepared. There's going to be damage and I'll do my best to contain it. So in between there used to be nothing. The fractional general counsel, the outside general counsel solves that in between stage.
Okay, so and we've had these conversations off. We're trying to capture a lot here, but let me try to get some of the things you've said before. Like you talked about the opportunity cost. So there was something you said about how the executive who is reading contracts is part of his job. The opportunity cost of reading those contracts, and then the further cost of missing what you're gonna miss because you're not a lawyer. That's just not what you do, and you don't have the institutional knowledge. So, kind of tell me the risk that companies have whenever they go to try to do this work themselves. What are some of the losses they suffer, and how does outside GC structure mitigate that?
Oh, every company does business with other individuals and other companies. It's impossible not to. And the regular company in the regular course of business engages in contract discussions or contract negotiations. Now, sometimes those negotiations may take place to the satisfaction of the client. Sometimes the company will say, here's a contract, take it or leave it. Now, uh, a CEO or CFO, they can look over the contract and say, oh, it looks good to me, but they don't have any legal training any more than I would to be a CFO. So you have people who are looking over contracts and approving them who have really no idea what they're signing. They're just going based upon the promise of the other party. This is what I'm promising to do. But there's usually other things. And I'm not talking about buried in the fine print, but some things that occur in the course of contract negotiations that you really don't know what you're signing until there's a problem. If there becomes a problem, then we're becoming a fireman. We're going to show up as the firefighter because you already have a problem. That's one. The other is how much time does it take out of the average CEO's day to negotiate contracts, to draft contracts, to go back and forth with the responsible parties? I'd like to believe that a CEO or CFO of a company has better things to do or more valuable usage of their time by not acting as their own lawyer. I do believe in the old adage, he who represents himself has a fool for a client.
So, okay, um, let's approach this a little different. What sucks about fractional GC? What sucks about outside general counsel? Let's go there.
Well, I don't think anything sucks about it because the way that it is structured is the client defines the scope of the engagement. It could be limited when you're a smaller company, it could be larger when you're a bigger company, but the client defines the scope of what it is that they want to do, what type of protection that they need, of course, with the guidance of the lawyer. And based upon that scope, we come up with an amount of money that we believe is fair and reasonable based upon a couple of factors. One is the nature of the legal work. Some legal work is very easy to do, some is a little bit more complicated. Drafting a contract is not quite as complicated as, defending a patent lawsuit. So one is the nature of the work that's being performed. Two is how quickly do you want your lawyer to respond? There's a lot of times people say, I need a contractor. I need this reviewed, by tomorrow. And you contact the lawyer who may or may not be on retainer, but they're going to say, okay, I'll get to it, but it's going to take me a week to get to it. I have other things. You just called me today. When you're a fractional general counsel, you're kind of on demand. It doesn't mean just because a client calls that you have to pick up the phone that second every time, but you're paying for the lawyers, not just their time, but you're paying for them to be available to you when you need it. Every client wants quick service. And the best way to do that is to take that into consideration that you want to have somebody on demand. When you have a question, you want an answer. The other is the the ability for the lawyer to accurately predict what is fair and reasonable. And it's usually, again, based on how much time is going to be spent, how much availability, and the nature of the work. So the concept is we come up with what we believe is a fair amount of money. But over time, and I'm talking, let's say 2, 3, 4 months, certainly within 6 months, you're going to see, are we as the lawyers in the law firm bringing value to the table? Are we bringing something that's worth that amount? If we are, then the client's happy. If we are not doing the amount of work that would justify the fees, then we have to adjust the fees downwards because we're not in the business of taking clients' money without doing any work. The other side of the coin is if we're doing so much work that goes beyond the scope of the engagement, then the client has to understand that we came up with an amount of money that it was a little bit low. So it's generally a guesstimate. But when I say a guesstimate, it's also based on having 15 plus years of experience in doing this sort of engagement where you can say, all right, I believe that this is the proper amount of money, but knowing full well that it may have to be adjusted upward, may have to be adjusted downward. So if there's any risk, the risk is within the first few months, you're going to expect to see value brought to the table. So if there's no value brought to the table, there's no need to continue with the relationship. And we structure these relationships. If you want to cancel, but you're done at the end of the month and that's it. We don't like to do that. We like to work things out with clients, especially when we have an ongoing relationship. But that's the key to it is arrangements like this fosters a very close attorney-client relationship. And that's the key to it.
So let's talk about peace of mind. That's something you also say about, and I don't think maybe you said it and I didn't hear, but peace of mind is something you've always, because you've been doing this for 15 years. This is almost all of your practice. Very few people know like you. And you say the one thing your clients get is peace of mind. And also not just peace of mind. That's one piece I want you to talk about. So talk about peace of mind and then talk about the institutional knowledge, the entirety of the large language model that we are as a law firm that you are now tapping into essentially.
When you work with a company, whether you're in-house counsel or outside general counsel, fractional general counsel, you get to know the company. You get to know the people who are working at the company. You get to know how they operate, the ins and outs of it. So you're not just a lawyer when the client calls. You're the lawyer for the company. You know the company. You don't have to go through the wasted time in learning about the company, who's this employee or how do you operate. You can hit the ground running with a phone call from the client. That's very important.
Yes, and so in terms of, And the other thing was we find that, and this is stuff you've told me, Steve. I'm just repeating them. We find, and I found it in my practice too, to be honest, but a lot of times your clients are not calling you because they're afraid of running a bill. And fractional GC, outside general counsel, solves for that. Give me an example of that.
The billable hour model discourages a close attorney-client relationship, in my opinion. If a client has to pick up the phone or write an email to a lawyer, they're going to hesitate unless it is absolutely essential, meaning the house is burning down. They're going to hesitate because they're going to say, I'm going to get billed for this call. I'm going to get billed for the email. I'm going to get billed for the responsive email. Nobody likes to get billed, but nobody wants to be in a position where they're going to say, I'm discouraged from calling my lawyer because I'm going to have to pay for that phone call. And it's usually that phone call that you failed to make that's the most important call that you did not make that leads to a problem. On the other hand, when you have a fixed fee, and also one of the benefits that you had mentioned before is in the past, clients had said, one month you bill X, another month you bill X times three. I don't know how to budget for this. And how am I supposed to, afford what I don't know? Well, the fractional general counsel takes that out of it. It takes out the disincentive, but it also takes out the unknown. So from the beginning of the engagement, the client knows how much they're going to have to pay, and the lawyer knows how much they're going to get. It makes it very simple. There's no unknowns. If it's an amount of money that the client can afford and they're happy with the services, there's no unknown costs. There's no hidden fees. Plus, you take away the disincentive of the company calling you. They can call you all they want. They can email you all they want, and you're not going to charge for it because it's included in your services. So that one phone call that an owner or CEO would hesitate to make because they don't want to incur that cost, they can then prevent either a lawsuit or a problem or regulatory involvement because they called up the lawyer and the lawyer said, whatever they said to them is good thing I have a lawyer that I can call and they can give me information and give me the peace of mind to know, one, I can pick up the phone call. Two, they know my business. Three, I hire them to be the doctor to prevent the problems. So if you add them all up together, it changes the mindset. It creates a better attorney-client relationship. It makes the costs a known cost that can be budgeted for, and it allows for the free flow of information where we can best represent the interest of the client.
So let me say, okay, first of all, Romano Law, we have 20 lawyers, and I believe as of right now, we have 11 states 11 jurisdictions that we have licensed practicing lawyers in, including the UK, Ontario, and Nigeria. Okay, so we're talking 8 jurisdictions in the United States plus these 3 international. So that's a huge spread as to the kinds of questions. So you're looking at an engine that can really grind out a lot of international, domestic knowledge put together in one place, and you're just sipping at that. You're just getting your monthly derivation of that knowledge and that guidance and advice. Very, I've always, as a young lawyer, I always thought of myself as a consigliere because I love the Godfather movies. I just love I love everything about the consigliere. What resonated with me. So I love this idea of being able to give advice, just give it, and not have to worry about. You didn't ask me that, man. You asked me this, so I got to answer this. But how about the fact that there is no question that doesn't have scope and scale surrounding it? So one of the things I want you to talk about, Steve, is this idea that with fractional general counsel, you're not getting an answer to your one question. I am now free to scope it, to really go back into my bench and pull all the knowledge sources that I have and bring to bear on your problem. You're not dealing with one lawyer, you're dealing with institutional. So I want you to tell the customer, the client, how we are able to see an issue more 360 through the outside general counsel. And you've said it's in different ways, but I just want you to kind of touch that again.
We can handle things from a holistic approach for a couple of reasons. One is that, like you said, we have a number of lawyers who are admitted in a variety of different states. If a company is doing business in one state, that may be the case, but a lot of times companies grow into other states or they have a dispute with a company in another state. Also, you could operate nowadays with working remotely. You can have a New York corporation that has an employee in Florida but then you have to register to do business in Florida because you have an employee there. Most people won't know that. So if you have an employment lawyer, a lawyer in Florida, which we do, then we can handle the work in those other states. Now, a general counsel, your average general counsel is basically what's called a generalist. You know a little bit about a lot of things, but not a lot about anything. And I don't mean that as a bad way.
Yeah.
A general counsel is exactly that, general. When a general counsel needs something more specific, they contact a law firm or multiple law firms. So in this case, on the one hand, I don't want to say bypass the general counsel because we do provide services that go above and beyond the outside general counsel, but you're getting a law firm that has a deep bench of talent in a variety of states and a variety of areas, whether it be labor and employment, tax for yourself and others, intellectual property, entertainment, business law, commercial disputes. And we do, as you know, we do a lot of commercial litigation and transactions. So you're getting uh, that specialist enablement, the specialist mindset from the outset without having a general counsel go through another law firm. The other services that we're able to provide is some companies do have a general counsel, and that's fine, but the general counsel is often overloaded and has to either hire somebody else or send work out to another law firm. And that law firm is going to be billing by the hour too. So we also act as outside general counsel to companies that have a general counsel but need us to either handle their overflow work or they want to be able to have that law firm on demand who will pick up the phone to answer their specialist call that they can't answer because they're a generalist.
And we did some research, or you told me about the numbers of what the legal spend typically is for a small business within a range. And we came up with that number. And I think you did an analysis as to how much it will cost these companies to hire a staff to deliver the legal services they need, or a general counsel and a staff or whatever, compared to this negotiated subscription that we work out. So I guess my question is, how justifiable are the fractional general, the counsel, our fees on this are going to vary depending on the situation. But are you convinced, and how are you convinced that in every situation you're going to be spending less here than you would be spending in the
Well,
traditional model?
let's do, and this is not how we come up with the fees, but just as a benchmark. Let's say a company has a gross revenue of $5 million. Okay, so you have $5 million. That's 5 million reasons to want to protect your $5 million. So if your average company spends, let's say, 2.5 to 3% of their annual budget, excuse me, of their annual gross earnings on lead on outside general counsel services, it's $125,000 a year. Now, $125,000 a year may sound like a lot of money for legal services, but there's no generalist that you're going to be able to hire to be your general counsel for $125,000 a year. It's not possible. Anybody in New York City or any major metropolitan area, you're going to want somebody who's going to have 10 plus years of experience. And I don't know any job in any company that you can be a general counsel and pay, that kind of money. It doesn't happen. That kind of money is what you pay an associate attorney who's starting work right out of law school.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. That's you actually just crushed that one for me. I know the representation is going to change, and we build this thing and we're growing with it. But as of right now, what are some of those menu a la carte items that are typically in this relationship that from day one you can worry about, and what is generally excluded and not part of the subscription?
One of the main things that I find that almost every company needs is they need assistance with labor and employment. It's one of those areas that usually trips people up because they don't know any better. For example, a lot of times people say, "Well, I'm getting sued because I didn't pay minimum wage and overtime." I don't understand. I had an agreement with this person to pay them a salary of $500 a week. So one, I asked how much money they pay. Two, I asked the nature of their work. And I said, you can't hire them as a salaried employee because you have to make above a certain threshold to be considered a salaried employee.
I got to jump in here, Steve, because I don't want to forget this, and I'm going to forget it. I have a client right now hired me to defend him in Texas. An employee just went in, drove a forklift into the wall, and came out limping. and we just got a demand for $165,000. Why? Because he did not subscribe to workers' compensation. And of course, when he was doing his business, he's thinking, I don't need to do that. There was no lawyer to ask. He didn't ask us. We would have told him, don't do it. Because when you don't have workers' compensation, automatically in Texas, it says there are defenses you cannot raise. You can't say he drove the damn thing into the wall himself. It's over. All you can argue about is the damages. On every single negligence case, you have the liability phase, which is, am I responsible for this guy's injury? Then the second phase is, how much am I responsible for now that it's been determined that I am responsible for his injury? So we fight on two different things. We fight on liability, and when we lose liability, we fight on damages. I can't fight on liability because you didn't have workers' compensation. So that's out. All I can do right now is try to argue that his spine didn't hurt as bad as he said. So this guy is facing a $165,000 pretrial settlement, which we're probably going to knock out maybe in the 50s if I'm really good, if we're really good at this. But that's $50,000, and all he would have had to do was have a subscription. And on day one, Steve would have said, "Go get the work compensation." Always $2,000. Get it now because it's going to cost you $1 million later. Do it now. Problem solved. Go ahead, Steve.
It's almost one of the first questions that I ask is you have employees. Do you have workers' compensation for every employee? That's for two purposes. One is because if you do not have workers' comp insurance in the state of New York, then you are personally liable for the monies paid in workers' compensation for lost wages, permanent loss of function of your body, and for medical bills. Medical bills are extremely high. So not only are you liable, but you are personally liable, meaning you can get a judgment against you personally. It's that severe. Also in New York, if you don't have workers' comp insurance, you get penalized $2,000 for every 10 days of non-insurance. So I've had people call me up and say, I didn't know I needed to get workers' comp insurance for myself. I'm a one-person company. I said, did you ever apply for the exemption? They said, I didn't know that I needed to. Well, unfortunately, you did. If you came to us from day one, it would have been one of the first questions that I asked. Do you have workers' comp? That also leads to other questions. Do you utilize contractors that you believe are independent contractors, but they're actually employees? There's a big issue now, especially with the rise of, the apps like Uber, Postmates, Lyft, DoorDash. Are these people employees or are they independent contractors? A lot of companies say to me, well, I had them sign an agreement. They agreed that they're an independent contractor. And my response is that contract is one consideration amongst many in determining whether or not you have an employee or an independent contractor. And the negative aspect of hiring somebody who you believe wrongly is an independent contractor is they can sue you for lost wages. They can sue you for a lot of things that you don't know that they can sue you for. Not to mention that the labor law has a lot of provisions where if you get sued, the employee can recover their attorney's fees. It's one of the few fee shifting provisions that's allowed by statute, and it's to protect the the laborer from the big bad company. Having to pay damages or having to pay for breach of contract or whatever it may be, in addition to paying somebody else's legal fees and yours, that's a big aspect that most people don't take that into consideration because they don't know. It's our job to educate clients, to provide them with information where they can either make smart business decisions or they can focus just on making business decisions and leave the legal to us because that's what we do best.
Exactly. And I think that's it right there. All of us are in the people business. Your greatest asset and resource is your human resource. And on human resource alone, from day one, when you became an employer, from the minute you got that employer identification number and became an employer, you need general counsel on the spot. Now, how much you're paying could be argued, but you need it. And that's just the one service out of what we've got a menu of, I don't know, 60. I read through the list. It was so much stuff that we do when you look at the collective experience and background of all of our partners and all of our associates and all of our licensing. There's just so much. In addition to telling you, get some workman's compensation, make sure the classification works. We're able to give you advice on your intellectual property. Like I know I don't know the list off the top. If you can list some of the stuff that's on the menu or that's typically on the menu, you started with employment, which is the killer. What else?
Sure, labor and employment's one, tax is another, that's your forte. Intellectual property, this is the example I give to just about everybody, something very simple. I said, the name of your company, I don't want to use an existing company, but let's say it's XYZ company. They may or may not have a mark, but they have their name. If they've been in business for a while, they have goodwill associated with their name. And most people don't realize. I said, "Do you have your company name trademarked?" They said, "No, why do I need a trademark?" I said, "Well, what's to stop me from opening up a company called XYZ doing business as ABC Company and taking away all your clients?" They would say to me, "Well, they can't do that." I said, "Why not?" They said, "Because they can't do that." I said, "They absolutely can. If you have a trademark, yeah, you could fight it out and say you had a common law right to that mark. That's very difficult. If you have a registered trademark with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, that gives you a lot of legal protection against somebody who tries to siphon off your goodwill. It's not an expensive thing to do. It's something that's very smart to do, and it protects the company in the event of what? Somebody engaging in some sort of unfair business practices."
Hey, Steve, you and I talk about this a lot when we have time to talk, but this idea that, you know, I don't know, maybe there are lawyers out there who love pay me regardless. I hate it when I cannot demonstrate that you came to me with a problem this big and I reduced it by this much. I actually do a thing in my head where I go, okay, this is how much you paid me. This is how big your problem was. Now add my fee to your problem, and then let's see just how much savings. Did I save you at least as much as you paid me? Even when I save you as much as you paid me, I feel bad. I want to know that you paid me $10,000, but I saved you like 70,000. That's what makes me happy. This idea that yes, I got paid, but only because I delivered service and value, calculable, measurable value to you. So you and I, we were talking about this idea that I really don't, you bring me a case and you're like, Uzama, I'll give you $50,000 if you do this. And I look at it and I know I'm not going to win this one. I'm just going to take your 50K and be richer. And you're not, I don't want that vibe. I'm going to tell you to take your money and walk. So we've always looked for ways where our clients, because it's important to us at this point in our careers, you've been doing this long, I've been doing it long, we're in our 50s, whatever. We want to know, we want people to look at us and smile and kind of say, that's my guy. That's a good person. That's a good man. He took care of me. And so taking your money is not as important as delivering value. And I think the outside general counsel model is a culmination of that. I don't want you paying me if I'm not delivering value. And if I'm delivering value, I want you to be happy. When you see my bill at the end of the month, you're like, yo, I really am getting ROI on what I'm paying my lawyers. So that was kind of what I wanted to add to that. But Steve, I don't know if you wanted to touch on that too, but that's a big thing we talk about, this idea of I really truly want you to look at me, not go, oh man, I got to pay this guy. More like, wow, dude, I would actually pay you more if circumstances. And then this idea that we grow with you. So as you grow bigger, if you go from a $1 million company when you came to me and now we're at 100 million, I think you'll be okay with increasing my monthly representation of you, and it wouldn't hurt you. So, well, do you have anything you want to add to that? That was my spiel.
Yeah, sure. I mean, sometimes it's difficult to have a direct correlation between how much you paid the lawyer and how much value it added. It's very difficult to do that, but you can have certain KPIs that are indicators of that value. One is how many times have you picked up the phone and your lawyer did not answer? How many times did you pick up the phone, call your lawyer, and they didn't get back to you within the same day? If that never happened, that's an indicator of the responsiveness that every client wants, but very few clients get. The other is how many different matters are we working on? Is it one? Is it 20? Is it 10? What's the nature of those matters? Also, is it taking work away from the owner of the company or the general counsel of the company or the people who are doing this work? If they can take that time and use it towards other things, then it's an opportunity cost that they're no longer paying for because they're hiring a general counsel. So there are other things in addition to the fact of, like I said, if you have a clean house and you know that that house was made clean because you have a lawyer who's being vigilant and looking after your interests, then you're going to sleep better at night knowing if a problem arises, I know it's going to be taken care of, or it's not even going to arise because it's already been taken care of. That sort of peace of mind only comes from when you have one, a close relationship with your lawyer, and sometimes it's just the nature of the beast. It's long lasting. We don't engage in these types of arrangements to have a one-off. We don't want to represent a company for 1 month and go home. We want to represent a company for the life of the company for as long as possible. We want to be able to provide that value. So what we're seeking is a long-term relationship. And over the course of a relationship, if everybody's happy, then the relationship uh, tends to get better and closer over the years. I can't tell you how many times, just because the client can call and pick up the phone, how much closer I become with my clients, how much more they want me to know their business because we have that long-term relationship. If we were doing this just to, take people's money and do a one-off or a couple of months here and there, the model wouldn't work and we wouldn't be able to do it. A perfect example uh, in terms of valuing something, because it literally just happened. I had a new client that came on with a small company with our fractional general counsel services. Started the beginning of March, so it's very recent. First thing I did was, just in no particular order, I went on their website to check them out a little bit. And I'm looking and I noticed they didn't have the ADA accessible screen reader for those who are visually impaired. And I know from my own experience that a car service, or excuse me, a company or car services that, I represent, a number of them, that they're a public accommodation. They're available to anybody who wants their services. They have to make their website ADA accessible. I know that other companies have been sued for not having that screen reader, and it's a legal stick up. But those lawsuits usually cost about $10,000 to $15,000 in damages, another $10,000 to $15,000 in legal fees. So you talk about $20,000 to $30,000. The first day, I said to this guy, I said, "Why do you not have it?" He said, "I didn't know that I needed to have it." I said, "Okay, here's 5 websites of your competitors. Check out what they do have. Don't look at the other ones that don't, because the ones who do are the ones who are going to be insulated from a lawsuit. Because once they see that screen reader and that ADA accessible notification, the ambulance chasing lawyer that wants to prey on the unsuspecting business owner is going to go elsewhere." So he paid for the service by the time I talked to him next, which was 3 days later. So he wanted to know originally, how am I going to provide value to him? I had to say it because it was just the truth. Did I provide value to you thus far by preventing a lawsuit that I can't guarantee, but you were likely to get one? And if you weren't, then it's out there. And a lot of what we do is it's risk management. It's, you don't have to get the ADA reader, but you take the risk of getting a lawsuit. The cost of the ADA reader is low. The cost of a lawsuit is high. We would rather say, don't take the risk and manage that risk appropriately. You can not take the risk as a business owner, or you can take the risk. But our job is to be able to advise the client of what those risks are, and they make the ultimate determination. But from day one, I provided value to this person that was tangible. And if he didn't believe that the value was provided, he wouldn't have gotten the ADA screen reader.
And that's it, isn't it? That's what you said is we want to be there from inception through exit, because we've got great startup lawyers in our corporate group. We've got M&A lawyers for your exit. And if it doesn't quite exit, it ends up in insolvency, bankruptcy. You got yours truly in a bankruptcy. So we have that plethora, that whole full service. So we really can, as we're talking you through your business, where we have the benefit of hindsight. We saw what happened at the beginning. We were there, and we can forecast what's coming down. And really, if we do our job well, you might actually get to the point where you're like, there's nothing happening here. Like, why is nothing happening at my, and that's our job, is to make sure as much as possible, make sure nothing happens. We want you, the legal side of your practice, of your business, to be completely boring. We want to make it boring for you. That is a good thing. So back to that, when you talk about advising these people with all this institutional knowledge, what we just talked about, Steve, you said something about KPIs. I mean, are you saying that the law firm now becomes like an adjunct legal department connected to the company, but not connected to it? So for all legal purposes and liability purposes, an outside firm, but for all practical purposes, it's your legal department, and you can work out KPIs and that will actually help you not just be better legally, but be better as a company. Something you said to me, please, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, if a company's so big that they have to have an in-house counsel or an in-house legal team, that's understandable. Some people like to keep it in-house because they like to have them in close proximity. But nowadays, with the advent of Zoom, remote working, remote collaboration, you can have your own legal team without paying for them to be employees, without paying for office space, without paying for the headaches of having to supervise these people, amongst other things. You can have all of that as long as you have the mindset of, I want to work with a law firm that's going to be able to look after my interests, that's going to do everything they can without having to, pinch pennies to say, okay, how much more can I bill out of this client? How much more am I going to have to look at these 5 pages of legal bills that show, oh, point one of an hour, that's a phone call. Oh, point one of an hour, that's an email. By the time they get to the second page, they've had enough of it. They're sick of us. They don't want to call us. But by doing it this way, we become an extension of their company. We become the ability to say, when they have a problem, we write a letter, we say, please take notice that we are counsel to the company. A company that does not have legal counsel can't do that. A company that has to hire a law firm to do that, they can do that, but you're going to pay a lot of money for that. This is providing the same, if not better, services than an in-house counsel would. One, because of the vast knowledge that we have over the nature of the practices of Romano Law. Also, of, like you said, the number of states that we can represent the interests of a company. So you can set up KPIs. Let's work with the company to say, let's go through it, and this is what I anticipate we're going to provide to you. And if we don't, then let's reevaluate the situation. And there are times where, look, this is a service industry. So the whole purpose of it is to say, you want to put the mind at ease of the business owner or the CEO, so that way they can feel comfortable knowing that everything is running properly or as best as can be. And if something happens, Steve or Uzoma or Romano Law is going to take care of it. And that's what they really want.
Absolutely, Steve. I mean, it's so the reason I asked you the crazy question about what sucks about it is because you and I know we've really looked at it and we can't figure out what sucks about it. There's going to be some pricing differential. That's the first thing you said. I don't know if you're, what value, what subscription level you should be at, but we'll figure it out with time, especially because we're not tying you to any long contracts. It's to terminate whenever you feel like. So it gives so much freedom and solves so many of the problems. And again, I'm a big fan of aligning interests. I want my interests to be aligned with the people I'm doing business with. So I have an incentive to do the right thing, and they have an incentive to do the right thing by me, not because of some code of conduct or ethics or morality, but because literally, if I get better, you get better. So we talk about things like being able to work with your firm's business plan. Back in the when you have a legal counsel department, you take the year's business plan and the budget and you bring it to legal, and legal looks at it and goes, okay, this. That kind of advisory is really what excites me, is that I can help build the future so that there is an ROI on legal. Okay, I think
The,
we did.
the best thing that we can do and that we have is, anytime somebody questions whether or not this is going to be good for them, I say to them, why don't you speak to one of my existing clients? Talk to them, see how they like the relationship. If I have an existing client, they've been with me for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that should tell you something in and of itself. But call them up, speak to them. They're going to tell you the honest situation. They're not there to lie for me. Speak to people who have been in this position and say, is it better? Is it worse? Do you like it? Do you not? I have clients that pay me money that I did a lot of work for them, let's say in the last 2 months, but I didn't do a whole lot this month. But they're not concerned about that because they know next month I'm going to have to do a lot of work for them. And sometimes there's ebbs and flows. But just like the months where we do a lot of work for not a lot of money, there's going to be months where we don't do a lot of work and get paid more. But it's looking at it as a whole, from here to here. How much did you pay and how much value did you get? If you got no value, then we got to end the relationship. If you got value, but maybe it wasn't what you expected on each end, then we aim to resolve that because we want to continue having a fruitful relationship.
Absolutely.
This is something obviously I feel very strongly about, that can apply to a lot of things, and I've even pushed it to being able to encompass litigation matters.
Okay, that's the topic for our next podcast when Steve takes us to part two. Because what are you talking about, man?
Part two, yeah, transactional matters are
That's a
easy.
whole nother level, Steve. But I'm excited to see what you always have some some novelty and some extra stuff that you bring to the table. You're just not a normal guy, man. You're just not a normal lawyer. So the first day I met you, there's just nothing normal about Stephen Shanker. A man is just a great lawyer, but he doesn't think like one, and that's what makes him great because he's a businessman. He's a guy, and then he kind of is a good lawyer for that reason. We rarely ever talk about law. It's always about the things that make you a better professional, an advisor, somebody who your clients look at and go, having that guy in my life makes me sleep better, makes me make bolder decisions, and give me more confidence that my decisions are infused with the highest level and quality of advice. That's what Steve does, and that's why he had to be on this. So, Steve, thanks
Yeah,
for coming through, and
my
always a
pleasure. Always a
pleasure.
pleasure talking to you.
Have a good one, my friend.
Well,
Okay, thank you very much.
yeah.